In the final dungeon, Babel, the demon lord's tower, two massive energies clash, revealing two individuals fiercely battling each other. One of them, a demon, begins laughing maniacally. He declares that the battle marks the end for the tyrant of the 12 divine seats, humanity's strongest and final hunter. The hunter is taken aback by the incredible power the demon possesses. Still, the demon confidently claims that all of this power will soon belong to him. After the hunter goes down, the demon notices yet another presence. He scoffs at the idea that a mere girl could pose any threat now that Chu Ganwook, the strongest hunter, has fallen. But the girl activates a massive magic wheel of immortality. At that moment, another figure appears behind the demon and stabs him. Shocked, the demon turns and demands to know who the attacker is. The hunter points out that, as always, the demon made the mistake of dropping his guard too quickly. The demon refuses to believe that a mere scratch could defeat him. However, the hunters are not finished. A magic circle suddenly appears, and the demon, stunned, questions when it was created. Gleipnir's chains then emerge, engulfing the demon and binding him. From within the hunter, Zeus's avatar manifests. The demon cannot believe that a human would dare go this far. The hunter responds that being called mere human is insulting, especially considering he has already defeated the demon 6 times. He adds that it is the demon lord who is truly insignificant. As the chains close in and suppress the demon's power, he becomes helpless despite all his energy. The hunter remarks that even though the demon is doomed to die every time, he always makes things unnecessarily troublesome. From behind, a woman asks why it always comes to this. The hunter notices Ha-Yun Si and acknowledges her presence, commenting that her shield came at just the right time. She then begins to cry, saying that Big Brother could have saved everyone. They had believed in him and followed him. Now the woman, shaken and overwhelmed, asks why he failed to protect everyone. The scene shifts to show the battlefield, where many people lie unconscious or dead, strewn across the ground. Tears stream down her face as she begins to sob even harder, demanding to know why he was so desperate to face the demon lord alone. In response, the hunter reveals that he has undergone 13 regressions, and in every single one, the outcome has always been the same: total destruction. It didn't matter whether humanity lost to the demon lord's army or triumphed over it. If they lost, annihilation followed. But even when they defeated the demon lord and cleared Babel, the result was no different. A new catastrophe would emerge, this time a civil war between the new humanity hunters and the remaining old humanity survivors. In an attempt to create a paradise, insane hunters attempted to fuse human consciousness, some driven mad by torment, others broken by trauma from endless slaughter and survival. Some had been confined in psychiatric wards, hunted by assassins, or driven to madness by unstable avatar abilities. There were elderly hunter couples who simply wanted to protect their grandchildren, and boy hunters who had been thrown into Babel when they were only 8 years old. In every case, even when the world was saved, it still collapsed into ruin. That is why the hunter says he must defeat everyone, not just the demon lord's army, but also the very hunters and comrades who would one day bring about the world's end. With quiet resolve, he draws his sword once more, stating that he must strike down all of them. He then moves to strike the woman as well. However, before he can do so, the demon suddenly attacks her first. The hunter immediately turns around in shock. The demon mocks him, calling him a brat and declaring that with such power, there's no way he could ever defeat him. Summoning a renewed surge of energy, the demon causes massive spikes to erupt from the ground. The hunter does everything he can to dodge the incoming spikes, but eventually, several pierce his body. The demon sneers in disbelief, questioning how this hunter could have claimed to defeat him 6 times. He tells the hunter to save such delusions for when he's asleep. Despite his wounds, the hunter insists that during the 10th regression, he could have defeated the demon alone. That time, however, he had chosen to deal with the other hunters first. Unfortunately, it seems the damage he dealt to the demon is still not enough. He begins to wonder whether the real cause of failure was giving up the divine spear, Longinus, back on the 65th floor. Perhaps if he had acquired the Azura King or the Uranus Avatar, the outcome would have been different. This line of thought clearly surprises the demon. The demon glares at the hunter in confusion and demands to know how he could possibly be aware of the divine spear Longinus, or the Azura King and Uranus Avatar. There were no missions or quests tied to those items, no way anyone should know about them. But the hunter calmly reiterates what he's already said. He has defeated this demon 6 times before. Then, without warning, he begins a slow countdown, murmuring, "Down for the count." The demon lets out a harsh laugh, remarking that this hunter is certainly entertaining, right up to the very end. But he warns that if the hunter plans to end things here, then so be it. He'll make sure it ends for real this time. The hunter agrees, admitting that he's tired of it all as well. He's had enough. In that moment, he releases the full force of his demonic persona, a transformation that radiates pure destructive energy. With cold finality, he declares that he will wipe out both demon lords and hunters alike. This time, he wants to see whether this cursed cycle of regression will finally come to an end. At the dawn of the new year, the world witnessed a terrifying broadcast. The demon lord appeared before all living beings, declaring with chilling authority that they would soon be swallowed by a whirlpool of terror. This marked his first appearance in front of humanity, flanked by his demonic army. As he announced the extinction of the human race in this dimension, he proclaimed that they would all die helplessly, screaming and begging for mercy. From each dungeon, waves of monsters poured forth, an endless tide of death and destruction. Soldiers were dispatched to respond, but even they hesitated. As they faced the grotesque creatures for the first time, some of them questioned whether they should even open fire. The soldiers readied their weapons and opened fire, but it wasn't enough. The demon lord only laughed as goblins and other monstrous entities marched headlong into the oncoming barrage, unfazed by modern human firepower. Bullets tore through the air, explosions shook the ground, but the monsters didn't stop. They weren't even scratched. The front lines crumbled. There was soon nowhere left to retreat. And the monsters, if their sheer numbers weren't terrifying enough, came in endless variety. Some were massive, others lightning fast, darting left and right with blinding speed. Each one brought death in a different form. As humanity sank into despair, a new hope emerged. They were called hunters, awakened humans who had formed contracts with powerful secondary selves known as avatars. These avatars took forms based on the hunter's inner natures, hidden talents, and deepest personalities. Some resembled ancient gods, others mythical heroes. No two were the same, and their strength was formidable. With the hunters leading the charge, humanity finally launched a counterattack. And although the cost was immense, 1.1 billion lives lost worldwide, they managed to reclaim territory and push deep into the occupied dungeons. But just when they thought they had made progress, a chilling system message appeared. Stage 1 tutorial cleared. Everything had merely been the beginning. The people of Earth were in disbelief. Everything they knew, their systems, their weapons, their understanding of war had failed. And then, in the midst of growing despair, a radiant light descended from the skies. It was the archangel Metatron. She appeared before all of humanity with a solemn request. She explained that, until now, she and the celestial beings had been holding back the demon lord and other dimensional invaders. They had been doing their best to impose rules and limitations on the chaos seeping into the world, but even that was becoming increasingly difficult. Now, she said, it was time for humans to rise. With the upcoming grand summoning, selected hunters would be granted the chance to ascend through the stages leading to the final dungeon, Babel. Their mission would be to reach the top of Babel's tower and defeat the demon lord who reigned there. Only by doing so could the dungeon be cleared. But time was not on their side. If Babel was not conquered within 20 years, even stronger monsters would be unleashed upon the world, ones that would not stop until they had annihilated not just humanity, but the entire dimension. Still, Metatron reassured them, not all hope was lost. Inside Babel, hunters could grow infinitely stronger. The angels promised humanity their greatest support yet. With the blessings of higher dimensional gods, the chosen would never walk alone. Metatron and her kind continued to pray for divine protection, invoking, "May God's blessing always be with the humans." But prayers alone could not hold back the chaos forever. As the battles raged on, the human soldiers began to realize the brutal truth. Their firepower, their curses, their weapons, none of it was working. They were barely slowing the monsters down. Frustration rippled through the ranks. Some in the rear shouted that they were already giving it everything they had, even without orders from the commander. They begged for leadership, someone to step up and block the next charge, because if things continued like this, the rear guards would be wiped out entirely. Then, with a monstrous roar, the beasts surged forward again. Panic broke out. The human lines collapsed, and soldiers began fleeing. One of them, trembling, screamed that he didn't want to die, that this battlefield, of all places, wasn't where he imagined meeting his end. But his hopes didn't matter. The monster lunged toward him. As he hit the ground, paralyzed by fear, a voice rang out beside him, sharp, angry, alive. "How long are you going to lie there?" Around him, the other soldiers were also frozen. The monsters continued pushing forward relentlessly. Unable to see any way to win, many simply scattered, running in every direction, each hoping that someone, anyone, would do something to stop the nightmare they could no longer face. Chu Ganhui reflects on how he had nearly died the moment he arrived. With his age well over 200 and currently living through his 13th regression, the feeling isn't new, but it never gets easier. Suddenly, more movement stirs around him. As he surveys the battlefield, his eyes land on the exact spot where he died in this loop. He mutters a quiet thanks, grateful that, this time, someone else had drawn the aggro, sparing him from being trampled to death. Meanwhile, his avatar observer begins analyzing the situation, presenting tactical data and a summarized report. But Gon isn't paying attention. He just wants to be left alone for a moment, the weight of endless regressions heavy on his shoulders. More hunters arrive nearby. One of them grimly announces that they've already lost people. Another hunter, noticing Gon standing still, asks what exactly he's doing just standing there. A female hunter suggests that he's probably in shock after seeing a corpse and advises the others to just ignore him. Then she squints, getting a better look, and recognizes him. She realizes it's her older brother. Gon, meanwhile, lights a cigarette and casually remarks to himself that nothing beats a smoke after a regression. On his screen, data flashes about the raid. The boss is the Berserk Minotaur, part of the Soul's 8th Strike Force dungeon tutorial. He notes that they've walked right into a boss raid. The girl, Ha Yun-hee, age 19, whose avatar is the shrine goddess, hurries over to her brother. She tells him it's dangerous here and urges him to fall back to the rear lines before things get worse. But the battlefield is already in chaos. Another hunter shouts at everyone to stop zoning out and help. He then yells at Gon specifically, clearly irritated, wondering aloud whether Gon is seriously just standing around at a time like this. Gon responds calmly, asking for 2 more minutes. He assures them that once he's done, he'll deal with the boss himself. The irritated hunter snaps back, telling Gon to stop messing around or he's going to get himself killed. He warns that the last thing he wants is to feel guilty for not having said something. But Gon smirks and fires back a rhetorical question, asking whether the other guy even plans to finish the raid today at all. Without waiting for a reply, he begins walking forward. Yun-hee calls after him, begging him not to go, warning that he'll die if he does. But Gon picks up his sword and steps ahead. His eyes can't follow the movements of the boss, at least not anymore. So he decides he'll have to predict them instead. The Berserk Minotaur suddenly shifts its focus toward him, but Gon is already ready. As the Berserk Minotaur charges, Gon reacts instantly, sidestepping its massive swing and slashing at its fingers. The beast recoils with a furious, guttural scream that echoes through the dungeon. Gon lets out a laugh, genuine, wild. This was the kind of thrill he had missed. He thinks to himself that this is more like it. Without hesitation, he lunges forward again, slashing at the monster over and over. Each strike lands with precision, and with every blow, he seems to enjoy himself more. The Minotaur, enraged, lets out a deafening roar and begins thrashing even harder. Gon, grinning, tells it not to open that huge mouth like a mindless beast, warning that if it keeps it up, he might just slice that off too. Then, with a final powerful strike, fueled by both amusement and skill, he brings the Minotaur crashing to the ground. Its body collapses in a heap of muscle and fury. To Gon, it had been pathetic. The creature offered no real challenge. He scoffs, wondering what kind of weaklings actually get stuck on a monster like that. But as he turns to leave, something catches his eye. He notices a cut, small but fresh, on his own body. Apparently, he did get hurt a little. Just as Gon turns away from the fallen Minotaur, he feels a sudden grip around his leg. The Minotaur wasn't dead. The beast begins to laugh, a low, rumbling growl of defiance, clutching at Gon's leg. The other hunters react with alarm, shouting out in concern. Gon, realizing his mistake, understands that with his current stats, he hadn't dealt a finishing blow after all. The battle isn't over yet. The Minotaur roars again, raising its mangled body in a final surge of rage. But Gon, without hesitation, drives his sword deep into the creature. He screams at it to stop struggling, to give up already. He adds coldly that he'll be sending the monster's friend to the afterlife soon, too. A system notification appears in the air. Hunter Chu Ganhui has dealt the finishing blow to Berserk Minotaur. The others are stunned. The raid results appear next, revealing that Gon placed first with 82% of the total contribution. Second place, Park Jundae, has only 6%, and third place, Ha Yun-hee, follows with 5%. Because Gon dealt over 80% of the damage to a Minotaur-type boss solo, he is awarded a special title, Horn Breaker. Another notification follows. Skill coin acquired, 1-hit kill. Item drop, Minotaur Horn. As Gon stands triumphantly atop the defeated boss, a sharp pain suddenly shoots through his leg. His expression falters, and he collapses to the ground. The others rush toward him and ask if he's okay. But one look makes it clear his knee is wrecked. Ordinary healing magic won't be enough this time. They call out to him again, urging him to say something, but Gon can't even speak. All he can think about is how he somehow manages to embarrass himself right at the end. Then, breaking through the crowd, Ha Yun-hee rushes to his side. Her hands tremble as she casts her unique avatar skill, Healing Flower, a rare flower-based spell that blooms directly over the injury and begins restoring the damage. Once the wound shows signs of healing, she gently tells her brother not to push himself so recklessly. She confesses that if something were to happen to him, she wouldn't be able to face the others back at the orphanage. She begs him to wake up again and again, her tears falling onto his face. And then, finally, Gon lifts his head slightly. He remarks how she always seems to worry more about others than about him. That's just the kind of person Ha Yun-hee is, a sweet girl who grew up with him in the same orphanage. A moment later, Park Jundae, leader of the Bronze Giant Raid Party, steps forward and praises everyone for their effort. He acknowledges that they must all be exhausted and encourages them to rest and recover. He even offers a round of applause in appreciation. Now that the injured are stabilized, Park suggests they move on to the reward distribution. He asks everyone to check their individual shares. Gon opens his inventory and scans the newly acquired loot, an impressive, even absurd collection of items. He lets out a tired breath and thinks to himself how ridiculous it all is. A faint smirk crosses his face. What a silly joke. Park Jundae, the raid leader, doesn't exactly appreciate Gorn's attitude, but what bothers Gorn more is watching everyone hand out piles of junk like there's some kind of priceless treasure. It just feels wrong to him. There's only one thing he actually cares about right now, the skill coin. He makes it clear that he wants it. Skill coins grant permanent abilities, incredibly rare and worth a fortune in any trade. The moment Gorn brings it up, Park Jundae chuckles quietly in disbelief, but not everyone shares the sentiment. Another hunter immediately starts shouting at Gorn. He accuses him of being a selfish brat, saying Gorn swooped in at the last second just to snatch the final blow, and now he wants to hoard a skill coin all for himself. His tone grows louder and more bitter with every word. Gorn doesn't even flinch. He casually remarks that the guy sounds like he's got a dog lodged in his chest, because every time he opens his mouth, it's just non-stop yapping. The insult lands hard. Ha Yun-hee watches anxiously, sensing the tension shift. The angry hunter's face twists with rage. He steps forward and balls his fist, clearly preparing to teach Gorn a lesson. He growls that he's going to smash Gorn's face in, make sure he never runs that filthy mouth again. Before he can throw the punch, someone catches his wrist mid-swing. The room stills. It's the captain, Park Jundae, activating his avatar's ability, Bronze Skin. His entire arm glows briefly as the flesh hardens into a metallic bronze sheen, temporarily reinforcing his body like armor. He addresses Gorn directly and calmly apologizes for the earlier commotion. According to the system's rules, he says, rewards must be distributed based on contribution. There's no way around it. He admits he let his own greed get in the way for a moment, but the rules are rules. So he offers the coin to Gorn, telling him to take it. The label reads, Skill Coin, 1-hit kill. Upon usage, permanently acquires the skill, 1-hit kill. Without another word, Gorn accepts it and then signals to his sister. The two of them quietly leave the area together, ignoring the stares burning into their backs. As they disappear from view, someone behind Jundae yells out, calling Gorn a jerk and demanding to know who he thinks he is. The man storms up and grabs the captain by the collar, seething. He demands an explanation. Does Jundae have any idea how much that skill coin is worth? How could he just give it away like that? Jundae raises his hand calmly, trying to de-escalate the situation. He reminds the man, Park Sang-min, that he's grabbing the captain right now, and he needs to watch himself. He explains that everyone in the raid is a comrade, and there's no reason to start turning on each other. Then, activating Bronze Skin once again, Jundae adds that it wasn't even his decision. The rules dictated the outcome. He was simply following protocol. Sang-min clenches his jaw in frustration. He doesn't like it, not one bit, but after a moment of tense silence, he lets go and storms off. Park Sang-min can't resist getting in one last jab. He mutters that if Gorn keeps acting so cocky just because he has a few flashy skills, someone's gonna crack open that metal head of his sooner or later. Turning back toward Gorn and his sister, Sang-min shifts his tone, more serious now. He tells them that this world isn't kind. It's a place where people kill each other over coins and scraps, nothing more. He reminds them they must have already seen the corpses of dead hunters, rotting in alleyways and gutters like discarded trash. But Gorn isn't interested in hearing a lecture. He sighs and casually starts picking at his ear, brushing off the man's words like dust. Still, Sang-min pushes on. He warns him that if he doesn't want to end up like those nameless corpses, he needs to change. He needs to fix that rotten attitude and purge his greed before it eats him alive. Hansi grows uneasy. She quietly asks her brother if he's really okay. Her voice carries concern, not just for his physical injuries but for their future. She worries that if this kind of reputation sticks, they'll be blacklisted from future raids. No team wants troublemakers, but Gorn brushes her worry aside. He doesn't care about joining raids with the likes of them. In his eyes, those people are weak, loud, and useless. As far as he's concerned, he and his sister are all they need. That answer surprises her. She's heard him say something similar before more than once, but there's something different this time. And while she's touched, she also doesn't like how casually he lights another cigarette right in front of her. She tells him that he really needs to stop smoking like this, like it's just a normal part of who he is. He chuckles and tells her that no matter how many times he comes back, whether it's once or 10 times, he'll always find her just as adorable. Hansi blinks, confused by the sudden affection. She tilts her head and asks what he means by coming back, but Gorn doesn't answer right away. His thoughts drift. He remembers, in earlier timelines, different regressions, he had to fight her, had to kill her. The weight of that memory, though buried beneath bravado and sarcasm, still lingers in his chest. He looks at her again, quietly wondering to himself, when will the next time be? When will he be forced to take her down again? Later that night, their home bustled with a strange liveliness. A group of avatars were goofing around, filling the space with laughter and energy. Some were dancing, others sparring playfully, while a few just lounged with carefree smiles on their faces. Amidst the fun, one of them mentioned how big Sister Yancy would definitely flip if she found out what they were up to, but another brushed it off, saying they were just having too much fun to stop now. That's when Yancy actually walked in, storming through the door with fury in her eyes. She didn't even wait to take off her shoes before yelling at them for using their powers indoors, something she had strictly forbidden. As soon as they saw her, the avatars scrambled and jokingly announced that the gang hag had arrived. That nickname, however, clearly rubbed her the wrong way. With hands on her hips and a deadly glare, she reminded everyone that she was still only 19, and not even close to being called a hag. Meanwhile, in a quieter part of the house, Gorn sat alone in his room. His attention was fixed on the stats of his current life, his 13th regression. Years, or perhaps centuries, of struggling to prevent humanity's extinction had taken a massive toll. His soul was now labeled as a worn soul, a condition that brought with it a barrage of negative effects: deep-rooted exhaustion, unshakable distrust, and a dark spiral into pessimism. His mental strength had dropped to a shocking -50. At some point, he'd crossed a boundary no human should have. He had pushed past the limits of what the human spirit could endure. And now, a lingering thought sat in the back of his mind. This could be the last regression. He started to review the basics again, how coins functioned in this world. They came in rainbow-colored ranks, each color denoting a different level of value and potential. But even with that structure, there was no single correct way to use coins. Hunters and avatars each carried hidden possibilities, and those could only be uncovered by experimentation, by risking everything on a gamble. But after living through 12 past timelines, he knew one thing for sure. On the 13th regression, patterns begin to emerge. The correct choices become visible. With this resolve, he fed 82 coins into a skill, Avatar Observer. The ability rapidly leveled up. He knew that if Yancy ever found out that he'd burned through what amounted to 32 million won worth of purple coins, she'd probably beat him senseless. As the skill reached level 9, a new function unlocked: synchronization. Without wasting time, Gorn activated it, asking the observer to sync with his data. The moment the synchronization began, the interface shifted. Then suddenly, he reached out and grabbed the avatar's hand, urgency sharp in his voice. He told it that there wasn't time. He needed to know. Could it already see his future self? Could it access those memories? In response to this desperate push, a notification appeared. A unique skill had been acquired, Forced Awakening. The avatar confirmed it. The root form had been expanded, and its potential had now been clearly identified. Gorn continued fine-tuning the Avatar Observer. With each activation, it unveiled more of its hidden depths. Satisfied with the synchronization, he issued a new command. He wanted a future calculation, factoring in every possible situation. The system responded, activating Observer's second ability, Release Prediction. Then, with calm focus, he directed it to identify all hidden enemies nearby and project their positions onto a visible map. Observer's third ability, Release Detection, followed swiftly. However, the system reached a limit. The final ability was still locked, and to release it, 5 navy-colored coins were needed. A high price, but not unexpected. Even so, everything was progressing smoothly for Gorn. He acknowledged the avatar's efficiency with a nod of praise before exiting the room. Outside, hidden in the darkness, figures had begun gathering. From a distance, distance, several hostile eyes were already fixed on the quiet little house. They spoke in low tones, annoyed and frustrated. Gorn had apparently hoarded every last skill coin for himself, an audacious move that many of them found infuriating. To them, he was nothing but a cocky bastard with more ambition than sense. Still, his recent feat was hard to ignore. One of them hesitated, pointing out that Gorn had taken down a Minotaur solo, a dangerous foe, and not something just anyone could do. But another waved the concern away, insisting that even powerful hunters could fall if caught by surprise. That sentiment gained traction quickly. They remembered Big Brother's teaching, how to use avatar predation to its fullest. With the seventh great summoning of the Tower of Babel approaching, they needed strength, not excuses. Strength to rise, trample competition, and finally get promoted to B rank. They had marked Gorn as a target worth devouring. After all, he possessed an avatar with rare healing powers. And worse, he could solo a Minotaur. If they could consume both Hunter and Avatar, they would rise. But before they could even finalize their plan, Gorn made the first move. One of them didn't even have time to scream before he was struck down. Gorn emerged from the darkness like a shadow with purpose. Then, as casually as one might swat a fly, he looked at another of the attackers, commenting with dry disdain that humans simply didn't have enough muscle. There was no satisfaction in breaking such fragile bodies. The group shouted in panic, concerned for their fallen comrade, Juno. But before they could regroup, their own captain surged forward and joined the fray. He hurled insults at Gorn, calling him a thief and accusing him of arrogance. Still, even he admitted Gorn had guts. Not that it mattered, he still believed Gorn to be weak. But Gorn, unshaken, simply replied with icy confidence. If the man really wanted to test his strength, he should have gone to a sumo gym, because here Gorn was on another level. His regressions may have stripped him of peak power, but not of experience, not of instinct, not of the keen judgment that only someone who had danced on the edge of death for centuries could possess. Even without overwhelming strength, he had precision, technique, and battle intuition that allowed him to predict every movement, read every situation. In human-to-human combat, he was untouchable. There was no room for doubt. He couldn't lose. That realization began to sink in among the attackers. One by one, their expressions shifted, from confidence to confusion, and then to fear. Whispers passed between them. Just who was this monster? Why couldn't he be stopped? But one among them didn't flinch. The strongest of their group stepped forward and asked his captain to stand down. He would take care of this personally. Then, as the others gave way, he summoned forth a terrifying entity, Ungoliant, an avatar twisted and monstrous, far beyond the usual. It didn't just appear. It oozed into the world, dark and dreadful. This wasn't a partner. It wasn't a companion. It was a creature born to destroy. Gorn didn't see it as an avatar. To him, this thing was a beast, a monster that had no place beside a human, one that didn't belong in their world. And the beast? It didn't care what Gorn thought. All it wanted was to rip him into pieces. The beast lunged for Gorn with a roar that shook the air, its claws wide and jagged like serrated blades meant to shred bone. But Gorn didn't flinch. With a calm breath, he summoned Avatar Observer, activating its secondary ability, Prediction. Immediately, the world seemed to slow. Gorn's eyes narrowed, each movement of the monster now mapped out in his mind, calculated and unraveled before it even happened. The first strike came fast, relying purely on speed. A straightforward assault. For someone like Gorn, it was almost lazy. He shifted to the side effortlessly, letting the claws slice empty air. The monster growled in frustration. It began to vary its angles, slashes from unpredictable directions, feints followed by brutal sweeps. But none of it landed. Gorn weaved between every strike as if dancing through the very margins of fate itself. The creature's rage mounted with every miss, its attacks growing more erratic, more vicious. Still, Gorn remained untouchable. From the sidelines, the attacker's companion could barely believe it. Watching the so-called prey toy with this monstrous avatar was surreal. This wasn't supposed to be possible, but it was over soon enough. With one sudden, fluid movement, Gorn closed the distance and struck. The hit was precise, clean. His opponent collapsed in a heap, and as he hit the ground, the monster vanished like smoke unraveling into the wind. Only silence followed. The group's captain watched in disbelief. He couldn't make sense of it, couldn't understand why this monster of a man was even here. Gorn gave him a blunt answer, the same reason they were: to eliminate the threats, to take them all down. Panicking, the captain made a move to attack, rushing forward. But Gorn had already stepped back, calmly putting distance between them. The captain snarled, claiming Gorn Gorn's time for clever words was over and reached for his weapon, only to grasp nothing. His hand flailed at his side, confused. There was nothing there. His eyes darted around in panic, searching the ground. His weapon was gone. Then Gorn let out a low, mocking laugh. The thing he was so desperately searching for? It was right there in Gorn's hand, a gun. Gorn inspected it casually, more curious than impressed. He mused aloud, wondering why weapons that had no effect on dungeon monsters were being passed around in human battles like they still mattered. The captain's expression twisted into fear. He barked in order to retreat, but it was far too late. Before anyone could move, the rest of the group was already falling. Master of all martial arts had activated within the gun, enhancing Gorn's precision and control. Each bullet hit its mark, unrelenting, efficient. Even those who tried to flee were taken down without hesitation. Gorn showed no mercy. The last thing he needed was any of them surviving, licking their wounds, and coming after him later when they'd grown stronger. He ended it now, cleanly, permanently. Once the dust settled, he turned back to the captain, who now lay wounded but not yet broken. Gorn wasn't fooled. He knew this one wasn't finished. The captain slowly lifted his head, seething in frustration. It wasn't just the pain that gnawed at him, it was the humiliation. Time and time again he was beaten, and now once more brought to his knees. Gorn reminded him, mockingly, that he should have finished the job the last time. That was his mistake. As the light hit the captain's face, the truth came into focus. He wasn't just anyone. He was the leader of that earlier raid, the one who had used bronzification, a rare skill that allowed him to temporarily turn parts of his body into hardened bronze. But even that wasn't enough. Not against Gorn. Gorn stands over Park Jundae, pointing the gun squarely at him, his gaze sharp and unreadable. He accuses Park of plotting to take him and Yancy out first, and then blaming the entire mess on the bald guy in the dungeon. Park frantically denies the accusation, but Gorn presses the barrel of the gun right up to his eye and coldly asks whether his eyeballs are made of bronze too. This makes Jundae panic. He pleads with Gorn not to shoot, his voice cracking as fear overwhelms him. Gorn, meanwhile, begins to piece things together. He's certain now that Park is just a low-tier member of the Giants' secret organization. Jundae is taken aback and stammers, asking how Gorn even knows about the Giants. Rather than answer him directly, Gorn shifts the conversation. He says he wants Jundae to deliver a message to his bosses. According to Gorn, those who sell their souls for minor rewards are destined to die miserable deaths, and he makes it clear that the one known as the Savior despises people who play small. Jundae is confused by this and admits he doesn't understand what any of it means. But Gorn doesn't offer further clarification. Instead, he knocks Park out cold with the butt of his gun. The blow is strong. Even Park's bronze-reinforced skin takes serious damage from it, but somehow he's still conscious. Gorn steps closer again, raising the gun to Jundae's other eye. Jundae panics even more and begs to know what exactly he should tell the Giants. Gorn calmly reminds him of the same message. Those who sell their souls for cheap gains will face miserable ends, and the Savior holds no tolerance for small-time players. Jundae nods quickly, repeating the message word for word, as if trying to prove his loyalty. Gorn acknowledges this with a cold smile and tells him he's got a good memory, but now it's time for him to disappear. Without hesitation, Park Jundae grabs his cloak and bolts from the area, not daring to glance back. He just wants to survive. A system notification chimes in Gorn's ears as the air settles. Mission cleared. The notorious killer gang has been defeated. Achievement unlocked. Soul duel completed. Title acquired. Death's Edge duelist. Gorn lowers his weapon, eyes steady. This was just one step. The real game had only just begun. Inside the orc dungeon, a brutal battle is underway. Dozens of orc bodies lie scattered across the bloodied ground, and in the thick of it, Gorn moves steadily forward, cutting down any that cross his path. His blade swings with unrelenting force, his expression unreadable, focused only on moving ahead. One of the orcs, wounded and terrified, suddenly raises his hands in surrender. He begs for mercy, swearing that he will never attack humans again. Gorn pauses for a moment and tells the orc that he'll spare him, on one condition. The orc, filled with hope, quickly agrees. Gorn then leans forward and poses a question. He wants the orc to answer what a red firecracker that explodes in 1 second is. The orc blinks, utterly confused. The question makes no sense to him. He stammers, trying to understand, but the answer never arrives. Before he can respond, Gorn's skill one-hit kill activates without mercy. A sharp burst of energy flashes, and the orc's head is severed cleanly, answering the riddle with brutal finality. The answer was his head all along. A system message promptly appears before Gorn. Orc warrior squad eliminated. Behind him, the lady following Gorn watches the execution and momentarily wonders if this is all going to too far. But Gorn doesn't flinch. To him, it's nothing unusual. These creatures were all fated to die sooner or later, and after a full year of slaughter and survival, you simply grow used to the killing. He glances at his avatar observer interface. 5 navy coins are glowing in his inventory. With this, he triggers Forced Awakening, using the coins to unlock Observer's final ability, Mind's Eye. A flood of information surges through the avatar system, expanding his perception beyond human limits. Gorn takes a breath and mutters to himself that the preparations are finally complete. The lady confirms she's collected everything they needed from the dungeon, and she suggests they should return to Seremu Academy now, since they won't be coming back anytime soon. Their sister, however, looks around in confusion. Something feels off. Before anyone can process it, a glowing magic circle suddenly forms beneath her feet. The group immediately recognizes the pattern. This wasn't ordinary teleportation. The lady gasps in realization, and Gorn affirms her suspicion. It's the great summoning of the Tower of Babel. Across the dungeon, other awakened hunters are also standing atop identical summoning circles. The sky hums with ancient energy. The Demon King's Tower, also known as Babel, has begun its next selection. At irregular intervals, the tower forcibly summons awakened ones from all over the world, dragging them inside its monstrous labyrinth. So far, no one has ever made it out alive. The survival rate remains a chilling 0. This is why most hunters dread the very sight of these magic circles. When it appears, fear takes over. Grown warriors begin to cry, panic, or beg for another way. The 7th summoning has begun. This time, the tower has selected hunters with the potential to defeat the Demon King. And as if watching from afar, the Archangel speaks quietly to himself. This truly may be their final hope. As the ancient magic circles hummed with residual energy high above the material plane, a pair of divine beings looked down upon the scene. The Archangel's expression remained solemn. This summoning felt heavier than usual. But beside him, a soldier with radiant white wings stepped forward with conviction. She introduced herself as Azazel, confident and resolute, assuring the Archangel that there was no need to worry. These summoned humans, she promised, would become the strongest weapons under her training. The Archangel gave a nod, placing his faith in her words, though a strange sense of déjà vu lingered in his heart. Something about all of this, about this specific summoning, felt eerily familiar. On the ground, Gorn watched from the gathering crowd. His gaze rose toward the heavens as he quietly vowed to himself that this time would be different. Whatever the cost, he would save the world, no matter what he had to sacrifice. Time passed. Among the group of exhausted hunters, Yancy slowly stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, confusion painting her expression as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. Gorn noticed the moment she regained consciousness. She struggled upright and looked around, asking where they were. As her vision cleared, she took in the sheer number of hunters gathered. Strangers, all with tense expressions, some in tears, others in shock. Gorn calmly told her they were now inside the Tower of Babel. These were all awakened ones, forcibly summoned just like them. The mood around them was thick with unease. Some people sat trembling. A few openly sobbed, whispering prayers or curses. The energy here was hostile, hopeless. Yancy scanned the crowd again, frowning. The number seemed suspiciously low. For something called the Great Summoning, she expected a turnout in the hundreds of thousands. But this place barely held even 500. Gorn explained that the others must have been scattered across different sectors. At first, Yancy didn't understand. She hadn't known Babel even had sectors. But Gorn clarified, Babel was divided vertically by floors. The higher one went, the fewer people existed on those levels. She nodded slowly as the structure began to make sense. Still, her voice tightened as she asked what their next step was supposed to be. Gorn, already anticipating what was coming, said that an explanation should appear any moment. Right on cue, a thunderous explosion shook the stone floor beneath them, and then a figure emerged from the smoke. With flamboyant theatrics and a voice soaked in arrogance, the being welcomed them all to the Tower of Babel. His body carried infernal energy, and his presence alone seemed to chill the air. He soon identified himself as Kruashti, the faithful servant of the Demon King. He glanced across the stunned gathering, some of the hunters clearly terrified, others visibly furious or deeply confused. Kruashti, clearly enjoying the chaos, told them that he would graciously explain the rules for the insects who had no clue where they were. The first floor of Babel had one guiding rule. Humans were ranked by their hunting performance. A system notification chimed in the air, floating before their eyes. Babel Floor 1, ranking system activated. Monster elimination, plus 10 points. Named monster elimination, plus 100 points. Boss monster elimination, plus 300 points. Complete dungeon clear, plus 1,000 points. Gasps rippled rumbled through the crowd. The stakes had just become terrifyingly real. The tower wouldn't just test survival, it would measure worth. And in Babel, only the worthy lived long enough to climb. Croashti, Demon King's faithful servant, announced the next stage. He declared that only the top 50 hunters would be allowed to remain. The rest, they would be eliminated. A hushed silence fell over the crowd. The weight of his words pressed down like a curse. Some stared blankly, others clenched their fists. Then, breaking the stillness, a hunter shouted out, unable to contain himself. His voice cracked with panic as he protested. He said that this was insane. There were already too many hunters crammed into one space. There was no way a single demon could take all of them on. Croashti didn't seem surprised by the outburst. In fact, he almost seemed to be waiting for it. Calmly, he warned the man not to act so high and mighty. He reminded them that in Babel, arrogance often came with a fatal price. His tone was cold, tinged with cruel amusement. He told them he hoped they would have understood his message after this demonstration. And with that, before the hunter could even take another breath, Croashti moved. A flash of movement, a roar of thunder. The hunter was struck down in an instant, his body falling limp to the floor, smoke rising from the point of impact. The silence that followed was absolute. The other hunters stood frozen, eyes wide in disbelief. No one had expected the demon to actually follow through on his threat. Some recoiled, others took a step back, and a few looked away altogether. The air was thick with fear and disbelief. Among the crowd, Gorn's eyes narrowed. He'd already known the truth, knew exactly who this demon was. Lightning Heaven's Croashti, the strongest of the 4 heavenly kings, second only to the Demon King himself in terms of power and authority. It had been a while since he'd last encountered this creature, and even now, the presence was just as overwhelming as ever. Gorn's mind sharpened. There would be no underestimating this opponent. Croashti was a predator, and they had just stepped into his cage. As the dust settled from Croashti's attack, one of the hunters nearby noticed something on the ground, a single coin gleaming in the dim light. A silence swept through the crowd again, followed by gasps. No one could believe it. The hunter who had just been killed had dropped loot. Croashti grinned as he revealed the second rule of Babel Tower's first floor. When a human dies, they drop 20% of all the coins they've acquired. That was all it took. In the next instant, the others rushed toward the fallen man's corpse, their eyes locked on the coin like starving beasts spotting food. The camaraderie that had just existed moments before was gone. Some were shoving, others were kicking, and a few even unsheathed knives. No one cared anymore about the life lost. All that mattered now was the coin. Greed had sunk its claws into them. Croashti watched with amusement, but raised his hand again to deliver the next announcement. Rule number 3. For the first 2 weeks, murder between humans would be strictly forbidden, but only within the village area. This instantly halted the escalating knife duel between 2 hunters. One of them warned the other that, after those 2 weeks were over, he'd better be stronger. Otherwise his own allies might just be the ones to end him. Gorn quietly observed the chaos. To think that a comrade's death could be celebrated like this, it was horrifying. But Croashti found it all entertaining. So much so, that he decided to grant them a special bonus, something he called a noblesse oblige, a brutal privilege designed to tear apart whoever had gathered the most coins. Just then, a strange energy began forming above the crowd. Yancy, sensing something off, spotted it hurtling toward Gorn. She cried out, desperate for him to move, but Gorn didn't flinch. The energy veered at the last moment, exploding just beside him. Smoke and dust flew everywhere. Yancy rushed to ask if he was all right. Gorn nodded, confused about what had just happened. That's when a new voice rang out. It was the Archangel. She reminded the demon of rule number 4. Neither demons nor angels were allowed to harm humans or compel them to act. Croashti's expression shifted from playful to irritated as he realized who had arrived. Azazel. Of all times, she had to show up now. His fun was over, but rules were rules. With a scowl, he announced the final regulation. Demons and angels would each grant humans different achievements and quests. The humans had the freedom to choose whom they would follow, light or dark. Survival wasn't going to be handed to them. If they wanted to live, they'd have to fight with everything they had. The stronger they became, the more dimensional pathways would unlock, and their power would evolve accordingly. Croashti began laughing hysterically, clearly delighted by the cruelty of it all, and then disappeared, leaving only his echoing laughter behind. Azazel descended shortly afterward. Some of the hunters, desperate and shaken, approached her immediately. They asked if she could revive their fallen comrade. She simply shook her head. Resurrection wasn't within her jurisdiction. The questions didn't stop. The hunters begged for information, anything that could give them an edge. Monster types, dungeon locations, survival tips, Azazel. But even as she attempted to maintain order, Gorn had already turned away. He told Yancy to come with him. She hesitated, confused by his apparent disinterest in what the Archangel might reveal. Didn't he care to hear more? But Gorn simply reminded her that the rules had already been made clear. There was little more she could offer except maybe quests, and they didn't have the luxury of waiting around. Babel first floor, Field Zone, Red Star Tribe Goblin Garrison. In the outskirts of the field, tucked into the base of a jagged cliff, a goblin encampment bustled with activity. Red markings painted across the hide tents gave the tribe its name. The moment the sentries received word of intruders, the entire garrison scrambled to arms. They shouted among themselves, humans were approaching. But this time something felt off. The goblins sensed that whoever was coming wasn't just another prey. The aura was different, dangerous, and they were right. Gorn stood at the edge of the camp, eyeing the goblins with the same detached calm he used on monsters before crushing them. He muttered to himself that these pests should have just stayed quiet. It would have saved time. But fine, if they were offering themselves up, he would happily collect the points. The goblins surged toward him, weapons drawn, faces twisted with rage. But their strikes were meaningless. One by one, Gorn parried, dodged, and countered, moving through them like a storm. No matter how many charged, no matter how diverse their attacks became, he dismantled them all with practiced efficiency. Then something caught his eye. An arrow, fast and precise, cut through the air toward him. He tilted back just in time, the bolt grazing past his cheek. A crossbow user. That would have been a problem if he hadn't noticed. The goblin marksman stood with disbelief painted across its face. It muttered that this couldn't be a human. No one dodged that shot. No one. Before it could fire again, Yancy appeared behind it in a flash. Her blade slashed through with decisive force, and the crossbow goblin collapsed. She called out to Gorn, proud that she'd taken one down. It was a rare smile from him. With that threat gone, he could clear out the rest without worry. Time passed. The last goblin fell, and the eerie silence of a completed dungeon settled in. Gorn glanced at the shattered remains of his weapon, a metal bat. Its durability had given out. He clicked his tongue. For all their arrogance, these goblins were just weaklings playing war. They should have died faster and saved him the trouble. Yancy said nothing. As they scavenged the area, she quietly admitted that she hadn't expected him to be that strong. She appreciated it, even if it was late to say so. Gorn shrugged it off. It was nothing special to him. Strength was just a tool, and right now they needed to move quickly. He urged her to help gather the dropped loot. Coins, materials, and monster cores. Every bit counted. Yancy asked why they were in such a rush. That's when Gorn finally revealed something crucial. Babel's first floor had 7 dungeons. Of those, 3 were classified as main dungeons. The most important among them, the Seawall dungeon. He explained that it held a hidden chamber, Pageron's Cradle, a secret room, and secrets in Babel usually meant power. They had no time to waste. They had to get to Seawall before the others. That was the plan. But before Gorn could take another step forward, something made him freeze. His instinct screamed, too quiet. Then he saw it, the faint metallic glint of a drawn crossbow aimed directly at his back. He turned slowly. It was Yancy, of all people. Her voice cut through the tension, demanding to know just who or what he really was, and what had happened to her brother. Gorn raised his hands slowly in a gesture of peace, stunned. He hadn't expected her to turn on him. Not this suddenly. He said nothing. Yancy didn't lower her weapon. She went on, explaining how she had felt something was off since the Minotaur dungeon. Her brother had always been timid, too gentle for combat. But this man, this version, was cold, cruel, efficient, as if he already knew everything before it happened. That's why she believed this wasn't her brother. Gorn stayed silent, his thoughts racing. After a moment, he asked her if she remembered the orphanage, specifically those group photos, the ones where she used to demand to be next to him, forcing the teachers to reshuffle the entire line every time. Because of that, he'd been picked on by Chano, the jealous older kid in their dorm. For a moment, Yancy flinched. She remembered that, but still, she shook her head. That wasn't enough. Not to convince her. If he truly were her brother, he wouldn't have changed so much. Not into this. Gorn looked away, his expression shadowed. Then, with measured calm, he shared something that hadn't left his mind since that day. In the Minotaur dungeon, he had seen a vision of the future. Not a metaphor, not a dream, a vivid, aching reality 20 years ahead. He suspected it was caused by the observer, a distortion of time or perception, a side effect of Babel's twisted nature. In that future, he had seen himself worn down, hardened, distant, his personality breaking apart piece piece by piece. He also saw Yancy die, and that was the first moment he truly woke up. The observer hadn't shown him the vision randomly. It had shown it because there was still time, because Gorn had the power to change it. That promise he made to her to always protect her, it still held true. Yancy's grip on the crossbow trembled. She tried to refute him. She reminded him that the observer didn't have the ability to show the future. But her voice faltered as Gorn described the exact scene of her death in harrowing detail. Too precise, too real. She remembered that promise too. Her hands dropped. In a rush of emotion, she ran forward and hugged him tightly, burying her head in his chest. Her voice was heavy with guilt. She apologized for doubting him, for not understanding sooner. Gorn wrapped his arms around her, holding her gently, but in his mind he remained quiet. This had happened before. Every time he regressed, every time he relived these same damn events, Yancy always figured something out, always got suspicious, and every time she made a new excuse to convince herself. She was far too perceptive. He didn't like that. 2 days later, sewer dungeon. Darkness filled the maze-like tunnels beneath the village. High-pitched squeaks echoed through the air as hordes of mutated sewer rats scurried along the stone floor. Yellowed eyes glowed in the dark, claws scraping against damp rock. One by one, they were cut down. A swift blur moved through the tunnel, silent, precise. It was Yancy. She stood behind him with a loaded crossbow, scanning the piles of mutilated rat monsters scattered across the wet dungeon floor. The blood, the guts, the stink. Everything about this place made her want to vomit. She whispered to herself, wondering just how far they'd go, how deep this madness would take them. Gorn, unfazed, moved efficiently through the last wave of squeaking creatures, cutting them down without pause. His blade never missed, and his breathing remained even. He muttered that it had to be nearby. Then, activating the Avatar Observer's mind's eye, his vision sharpened. The clutter of the dungeon peeled away in layers, dirt and stone, illusion and shadow, until finally it revealed itself. There it was, a hidden statue tucked away behind collapsed rubble. He approached and placed his hand on it. A dull glow rippled across the surface as a prompt materialized before him. It asked if he wanted to unlock the cradle by spending 3 navy coins. He didn't hesitate. 3 coins vanished from his inventory, and a low rumble echoed across the stone chamber. A massive circular hatch descended slowly, revealing a hidden staircase. The first floor of Padron's cradle was now open. Inside was a room so large it seemed impossible it could exist underground. Pillars etched in celestial writing held up a glowing dome, and ethereal mist curled around the shop interfaces. Yancy stepped in behind him. She admitted it almost casually. Perhaps because she was with her brother, none of this shocked her anymore. The monsters, the secrets, the impossible rooms, it all felt routine. But Gorn told her not to get used to it just yet, because this next part, this would surprise even her. He stepped forward and pressed his hand against a central console. A second pulse of light spread across the room as the interface opened. Shop unlocked. Rows of avatars and relics appeared as glowing projections in midair. Avatar Jafiro, 5 green coins. Avatar Thor, 3 yellow coins. Skill coin. Book of the 7 Heroes of Padron Continent, 1 yellow coin. Treasure. Mogori, 20 blue coins. Yancy stared at it all, completely baffled. Gorn explained calmly, it was Padron's cradle, a hidden shop reserved for those rich enough to afford transformation. A place where hunters could buy their way into becoming legends. One offer caught his eye. An exchange prompt appeared. Trade purple coins for 6 navy ones. The cost? 1,500 purple coins. Without flinching, he made the exchange. The coins changed form in a brief flash. 6 navy coins added to his inventory. Meanwhile, Yancy was still wandering around the room. Something drew her attention. A glowing projection showed an avatar recommendation tailored to her. Recommended avatar, 5 navy coins. Curious, she asked if buying this would give her 2 avatars. Gorn shut that down immediately. Only 1 slot was available. She couldn't unlock more avatars without upgrading her slots, and that was far more difficult than it sounded. When she asked how to increase them, he brushed off the question and told her not to buy that one. She blinked, confused, but Gorn shrugged, claiming her current avatar was far superior to that trash. His blunt tone made her smirk. She couldn't tell whether he was teasing or just being cold again. After a few more moments scanning the room, Gorn finally found what he had truly come here for. Tucked away in a separate alcove was a rare item. Evolution Stone, 10 Navy coins. Without hesitation, he bought it. The instant it was in his hand, something shifted inside him. The observer's dormant interface flared back to life. A new menu appeared. New Frontier, Evolution System unlocked. It had been a long time. The screen displayed a familiar path, Farseer, a title given to one who pierced through space and fate itself. The origin of the tyrant who once ruled the 12 divine seats. His companion for centuries. And now, with the evolution selection complete, he made his choice. Avatar Evolution Game Master. Bright light engulfed him. Everything else, the room, Yancy, the cradle, faded from his senses as his body adjusted. Reality itself bent around him for a split second. The Game Master had returned. They didn't say much on the way down, but the shift in air told them they had reached the bottom. The stench of mold and blood grew thick, the tunnel's walls slick with green decay. Yancy glanced around, uneasy. Gorn, on the other hand, kept his gaze forward, focused. At the far end, massive iron gates groaned open, revealing a cavernous, dimly lit arena. And waiting inside was him, the final boss of the sewer dungeon. King Ratus, the grotesque creature crouched on a raised platform of bone and rusted iron. His body was a bloated fusion of plague and power. Glowing red eyes narrowed in anticipation. As he noticed them enter, he twitched with excitement. Finally, someone had made it this far. He squeaked out a mocking challenge, half taunting, half curious if these two were all that dared to face him. But before the rat could finish his little welcome display, a flash of steel cut through the air. Gorn didn't wait. He charged in, telling the monster not to just stand there like some clueless idiot. This dungeon rat was nothing compared to what he'd seen. But King Ratus didn't take that insult lightly. The squeaks turned guttural, angry. A cloud of dense poison gas spewed out of the boss's back, cloaking the battlefield in a sickly green haze. Then out came the weapon, a massive, rust-covered iron flail, too heavy for a human to even lift, swung with unnatural speed. Yancy backed off, coughing, saying she couldn't see anything through the gas. Meanwhile, Gorn's eyes stayed locked on the flail's trajectory. He didn't care about the gas. He told himself to stay calm, stay precise. One wrong move, and that flail would crush his bones. He dodged the first swing, just barely, then struck with a counterattack, sharp, fast, clean. But the monster's ghost, its soul, lingering somewhere behind the eyes, watched. It seemed almost amused. These moves, though good, weren't going to be enough. The Rat King retaliated with another violent swing. The gas got thicker. Gorn's eyes stung. His lungs burned. And then it hit him. The flail grazed his side. Not a direct hit, but enough. Pain exploded through his ribs. A system alert triggered. Poisoned. HP decreasing gradually. Agility minus 30%. He gritted his teeth as he stumbled back, the rat emerging from the fog, oozing smugness. He squeaked again, thinking the fight was over. Gorn growled under his breath. The last thing he needed was a rat acting superior. Yancy, watching from the sidelines, scanned the notifications and immediately recognized the condition. She called out it was blood poison, and then quickly activated her avatar's ability. The shrine goddess's detox flower bloomed in her palm, casting a pale light through the smog. She threw it forward, and the poison was neutralized instantly. Gorn straightened, his lungs cleared, his muscles regained speed. His eyes snapped open, sharper than before. He muttered a simple thanks, then told the monster to come at him again. But this time, it wasn't him the Rat King was looking at. His ghost shifted. His gaze turned toward Yancy, twitched, calculating. But before it could even move, crack, a sharp kick landed square in its face, snapping its head sideways with an audible crack. Gorn snarled, asking where the hell it thought it was looking. That hit landed hard. The Rat King stumbled back, disoriented. He shouldn't have taken his eyes off Gorn. He shouldn't have gotten cocky. Gorn hated it when monsters underestimated him. He tightened his grip on the hilt. The next skill activated in his HUD. Execution trigger. One hit kill ready. With a flash of motion and the sound of air splitting, Gorn struck. The screen flared. Boss defeated. King Ratus, victory achieved. The arena fell silent. Yancy stood still, breath caught. The poison haze faded, and the monstrous corpse of King Ratus began to dissolve into particles of light. Gorn didn't even glance back. He just muttered that it was about time. Even after the fall of King Ratus, the ghost couldn't believe what had just happened. 2 hunters, just 2, had taken down the king of the sewer dungeon. Alone. It had been centuries since anything surprised him. Gorn's pupils flickered, his mind's eye skill activated. His vision sliced through the layers of reality like glass. Target, King of the Great Sewers, classification, A+ entity, tracking initialized. And in that instant, the ghost was no longer hidden. A ripple tore through the space near the dungeon's center, and a silhouette began to materialize. Blurred at first, then solid. Gorn's eyes narrowed. Yancy stepped back in surprise. The ghost froze for a moment, stunned. He hadn't expected this. They could actually see him. After 400 years of wandering unseen, someone had finally locked eyes with him. He muttered, almost to himself, that this shouldn't be possible. But the system didn't lie. The minds I saw through illusions saw truth. The ghost straightened his stance now, accepting it. There was no hiding anymore. His voice echoed, not in volume but in weight. He began to speak, not of the present, but of the past. He told them that, long ago, in the once peaceful world of Pagerin, a dungeon emerged without warning. Monsters spilled from it like blood from a wound. Hunters were born in response. 6 heroes rose to fight back, and at their helm him. He had been their leader. They had climbed Babel, fought, bled, reached further than anyone before, but they were crushed, utterly. Babel had been too vast, too monstrous. Pagerin was devoured, absorbed into Babel's endless maw, converted into nothing but fragmented dungeon sectors, turned into twisted biomes, fake monsters, even fabricated kings. Yancy's breath caught as realization hit. She whispered that King Ratu's, the one they had just slain, was a copy, an artificial mimic created from this man, this ghost. The ghost confirms it. Every inch of that rat had been modeled after him, just like the others. The people of Pagerin, they'd become blueprints, turned into enemy data, worlds ripped apart and enslaved by Babel's growing hunger. Even now, for centuries later, Babel continued its conquest. Dimension after dimension, world after world. It consumed them all. Yancy finally asked, her voice tinged with dread. If they failed, would Earth be next? The ghost didn't hesitate. He told her yes. If they lose, Earth will fall just as Pagerin did. That silence hit harder than any weapon. But Gorn had heard enough. He stepped forward, saying that was all he needed to know. Right then, a notification pinged into his view. You have uncovered the secrets of Babel. Title unlocked. First to learn the dungeon secret. Special reward. White coin X1. Yancy blinked, wondering aloud what a white coin even did. But Gorn already knew. He accessed his avatar menu. He explained that it could be used to unlock another avatar slot, something normally impossible without major achievements or insane currency. He activated the function. Skill activated. Permission expansion. White coin consumed. Avatar slot +1 unlocked. Gorn's interface glowed. A second slot opened. Now he could wield another avatar. They had nothing else left to gain here. But the ghost, no, the man, had one final thing to offer. He looked directly at them and told them his name. Shamandi, king of the great sewers, last leader of Pagerin. And for the first time in 400 years, someone had heard him. He said that if they truly intended to face Babel, to reach the end, then he would lend them his strength. A new system alert popped up before Gorn. Would you like to acquire Avatar, Shamandi, A+? Yancy finally understood it all. Everything made sense now. Gorn wasn't just getting a powerful new skill or a treasure drop. He was gaining an A+ avatar for free, and that was insane. The notification flickered in Gorn's view, offering him the A+ avatar of Shamandi. But Gorn didn't even hesitate. He shook his head, waved it off like an annoying pop-up, and simply said that he wasn't interested. That stunned silence hit harder than any spell. He added, almost as an afterthought, that he didn't need some low-tier avatar dragging him down. Yancy's eyes widened. She couldn't believe what she just heard. Low-tier? This was an A+ avatar, practically myth-tier for most hunters. People would kill just to get the chance at acquiring it. Even Shamandi himself, still semi-transparent, his ancient aura still flickering, was left speechless. 4 days after the 7th grand summoning of Babel, in the village area of Babel's first floor, a crowd of human hunters has gathered. Among them is Yancy. She approaches the angel stationed at the ranking booth and says she'd like to register for the rankings. The angel asks for her name. Yancy replies that she'd like to be registered as anonymous. The angel finds the request strange but complies, entering her as anonymous. Her current hunter ranking is 2nd, with a score of 1,770 points. She can hardly believe it. 2nd place. As a result, she's received the Ranker's Blessing. All stats +5%, status ailment resistance +10%, healing bonus +10%. The hunters around her start murmuring. They find it odd that someone so high on the leaderboard has no name listed. One of them asks if she's the one. Another comments that he doesn't remember seeing her in the raid group. Then someone notices it's a girl. They demand she remove her hood. When she does, no one recognizes her. The attention becomes too much. Yancy feels feels the pressure mounting, just like her brother warned. So much for staying anonymous. Now she wonders what to do, as more people begin to surround her. A short distance away, watching it all unfold, Gorn calmly pulls out his avatar, Game Master. He commands it to connect to Babel's first floor so he can register his own score. Skill activated, permission expansion, admin rights acquired, updating ranking information. Then, a warning flashes across the system. Ranking updated through an abnormal route. Everyone notices the update. The new score jumps to first place, and not just slightly. It's astronomical, over 10,000 points. A figure so high, even when combining the scores from 2nd to 10th place, it doesn't come close. And the name? Just a single character. X. The crowd is stunned. One of the hunters asks the angel if it's some kind of bug, but the angel doesn't seem concerned with the score itself. The issue isn't the number, it's the method. Someone clearly tampered with the registration path. But even stranger than the method is the person capable of earning that score. Far from the chaos, Gorn lets out a low laugh, amused by the confusion spreading in his wake. While everyone is distracted, Yancy decides to slip away from the crowd. But as she turns to leave, she notices someone lying on the ground nearby. Concerned, she walks over. She wonders if he's hurt. The man barely lifts his head. He tells her to leave him alone. It's already too late for him, he mutters. But Yancy can't just ignore him. She steps forward and summons her avatar, Shrine. However, Yancy suddenly remembers Gorn's warning, not to summon an avatar in plain sight. She immediately stops the activation. Just then, another man approaches and remarks coldly that she must not have heard what the injured guy said. He told her to leave him alone. The man then grabs Yancy by the arm. Yancy quickly pulls herself away and awkwardly excuses herself, relieved. She says, "Thank goodness," hoping this new arrival might be able to help the injured man, as she's in a bit of a rush. But there's something off about this guy. His grin is twisted, his presence unsettling. Despite that, he casually promises to take good care of the injured man. Then, without warning, he brutally kicks the man lying on the ground. People nearby flinch. Someone mutters that it's Igor the thug. He used to be ranked higher, but recently dropped to 6th place. Everyone knows getting involved with him is bad news, so most begin to back away. Igor scoffs at the wounded man, saying it's obvious he's practically dead already. Since Yancy said she was in a hurry, he tells her to scram. As for the guy's coins, Igor claims he'll put them to good use, then lets out a crazed laugh. Yancy watches silently. Then, skill activated, psychokinesis. In the next instant, Igor's head is slammed violently into the ground. He's stunned. He has no idea what just happened. While he struggles to process it, Yancy kneels beside the injured man and gently places something in his hand, a simple rice ball. Igor remains frozen, unable to move. Yancy tells him that struggling is pointless. It's just a D-rank skill she picked up recently, but it's more than enough for him. Turning back to the hurt man, she says she hopes he'll try living a better life for once. Just ranking high doesn't make someone important, she adds. She wants Igor to know he's really not all that impressive. Igor, infuriated, calls her a witch. He demands her name and yells for her to come back. He vows to find her and take her down. Meanwhile, the injured man slowly eats the rice ball. A faint smile crosses his face. For the first time in a while, he thinks maybe the world isn't entirely hopeless. He's deeply thankful for the kindness. Later, Babel's first floor, on the outskirts of the hunting grounds, Igor's hideout. Igor kicks open the door in a rage, shouting for Jacob to get ready. They're going hunting. He growls that he's going to break that stuck-up girl's nose. He asks if Jacob's heard of the psychokinetic chick, the one from the east, but there's no response. That only makes Igor angrier. He shouts once again for Jacob to get ready, but then he notices Jacob is already down. Panic starts to rise. If this place has been attacked, Igor realizes he might be the next target, but he has no idea who could be behind it. Who the hell would come after him? Outside, hidden in the shadows, Gorn watches silently. He's been keeping an eye on Igor for a while now. Whatever Igor is up to, Gorn already knows everything. At Igor's hideout, he inspects Jacob's body. His shoulder crushed by a hammer, stomach torn by a sword, deep piercings from a spear, and his leg badly mangled by an axe. Igor stands stunned, unable to comprehend how many different weapons his enemy could possibly be wielding. It doesn't seem like the work of a single person. He mutters to himself that when he finds whoever did this, they're as good as dead. A wicked smirk forms on his face. Just then, he hears voices outside. A group of hunters, likely disoriented, have stumbled near his hideout. One of them says that they don't mind running into monsters. They'll just hunt them for coins anyway. Still, Someone else among them wonders aloud where they've ended up. Another mentions that the area seems familiar and recalls hearing it was the base of a ranker named Igor. A girl among them advises the group to be cautious. She says that provoking someone like Igor isn't wise. But before she can finish, she is suddenly attacked from behind. Igor grabs her and takes her hostage. It seems Igor has a pattern, causing problems for women every chance he gets. As he eyes the rest of the group, Igor suddenly realizes that among them are individuals wielding a hammer, a sword, a spear, and an axe, the same types of weapons that maimed Jacob. The connection becomes clear in his mind, and fury overtakes him. He accuses them of raiding his hideout and, in his rage, strikes the girl down. The group stands in shock, fearing she might be dead. It's obvious now Igor has completely lost his mind. The girl's team quickly becomes enraged and rushes toward him, weapons raised, determined to avenge her. But Igor mocks them, calling them pathetic nobodies who don't even know their place. Far away, Gorn watches everything unfold through a magical screen. He notes that Igor is a potential threat in the future, fated to gain the Avatar Reaper. But, as always, Igor acts foolishly. It is then revealed that the weapons that injured Jacob didn't belong to the hunters at all. They were Gorn's. Gorn reflects that since only 4 days have passed since Babel began, the power gap between hunters is still relatively small. A ranker like Igor, despite his position, wouldn't stand a chance against 4 competent fighters working together. Still, Gorn wonders, if word spreads that a ranker was brought down by lower-ranked hunters, how will those below the top 50 react? Days later, at the Grand Temple of Tot, a couple of hunters converse quietly. One of them asks the other if they remember the ranker he once mentioned, the arrogant one he ran into. When the other nods, he simply says that guy is gone now. A few days later, at the Grand Temple of Tot, Yancy brings up the topic of the arrogant ranker she had encountered earlier. She mentions that she's heard he's now dead, apparently taken down by a lower-ranked hunter. Gorn, despite knowing all the details, pretends to be unaware. Yancy comments that this is why people should live righteously. Gorn wonders to himself whether that remark was aimed at him. When she notices his reaction, Yancy quickly laughs nervously, trying to brush it off. Their conversation shifts to the recent tension brewing among the lower-ranked hunters. With the threat of being hunted by demons if they remain unranked, many of them have started banding together and targeting ranked hunters instead. Yancy remarks on the intensity of the situation and recalls how Gorn had predicted this shift, even advising her to register anonymously in the rankings to avoid being targeted. She seems amazed that he had the foresight to think that far ahead. Gorn simply plays it off, acting clueless as always. He then informs her that they've arrived at their destination, Boss Room 1 of the Grand Temple of Tot. Gorn reminds her, as he had mentioned before, that he won't be able to protect her during the upcoming boss fight. He expresses his hope that she can manage the battle on her own. Yancy confidently responds that she can. Without saying much more, Gorn produces the temple's poison-coated ceremonial spear and signals that it's time to begin. As they step inside, they come face to face with the boss of the Grand Temple of Tot, the guardian of the temple. The guardian's eyes widen the moment he detects intruders. He roars in fury, demanding to know how they dare defile the sacred grounds of Regressed. Without hesitation, Gorn activates a skill and hurls the ceremonial spear at the monstrous figure. It strikes true, lodging into the boss's body and immediately afflicting him with low-grade formulated poison. The Guardian reels back, unable to comprehend how a mere human had dared to attack him in such a manner. He is, after all, the highest difficulty boss on Babel's first floor. To defeat him, one would need every ounce of regression knowledge and combat expertise. In response, the boss readies his weapons and bellows at them to prepare for death. But Gorn is already moving. He tosses a toxic tear gas bomb into the room, and thick smoke quickly engulfs the area, another irritating trick that chips away at the Guardian's composure. The debuffs start stacking: low-grade poison, poison caltrops, and now tear gas. Then Gorn brings out his next weapon, King Ratos's poison iron whip, and lashes it toward the boss. Upon contact, the Guardian is afflicted with yet another status effect, King Ratos's poison. Gorn had picked up that last trick from a rat, simple but effective. Watching the poison slowly chip away at the boss's stamina, he smirks and taunts the creature, asking how it felt to be hit with all 4 status effects at once. He wonders aloud if the mighty Guardian is just a little dizzy now, or was that staggering already there from the start. start. Amused by his own words, Gorn breaks into laughter. But the boss is far from pleased. With a roar, it slams its weapon into the ground and shouts for silence, furious at being mocked. Gorn, however, remains unfazed. He can practically read the boss's every move now. Swinging his flail in a wide arc, he begins maneuvering the beast into position, jokingly remarking that it's time to take it out for a walk. The boss howls in rage, demanding that he stop this nonsense and face him properly. In the midst of this chaos, Gorn's mind races ahead to the next step in his plan. While they drag this out, the poison damage will continue to accumulate. That's the key. Let the debuffs do the work. The only variable in this equation, he realizes, is what his partner Yancy will do. His thoughts are interrupted by a sudden scream. Yancey's. A jackal monster has broken off from the main fight, slipping past their front line and heading straight for her. Worse, it's not alone. A whole cluster of smaller monsters surrounds her, targeting the rear with deadly precision. She's in real trouble. Gorn immediately shifts his stance, trying to end the boss fight as quickly as possible. The boss, sensing the change in urgency, mocks him for abandoning his comrade mid-battle. He calls Gorn a fool for letting emotion ruin his strategy. But Gorn doesn't let it get to him. He reminds himself that he already warned Yancy beforehand. He wouldn't be able to protect her during the boss fight. Right now, he just needs to finish what he started. Meanwhile, Yancy braces herself. The jackals close in, but she isn't backing down. With a determined glare, she begins fighting them off, refusing to go down without a fight.